the cold steel of the handcuffs snapped shut with a final, merciless click, biting deep into the wrists of the most powerful man in Pittsburgh. Officer Jake Brennan smirked, utterly convinced he had just taken another thug off the clean streets of his patrol sector. He had no earthly idea that the man shivering in the back of his cruiser was not a criminal. He was his ultimate boss. In exactly 1 hour, Brennan's badge would be gone. His career would be reduced to ash. This is the true story of the biggest mistake a bad cop ever made. The city of Pittsburgh was breathing a collective sigh of relief beneath a crisp, rain-swept October evening. For a city of 500,000 souls, it had endured more than its share of turmoil, political corruption, and a deeply fractured relationship between law enforcement and the communities they were sworn to protect. Aaron Miles, 42 years old, had been sworn in as the city's new mayor less than a month earlier. His campaign had been a grueling, grassroots fight built on the promise of systemic reform, transparency, and bridging the massive divide between the wealthy eastern neighborhoods and the neglected urban core. Aaron was a Pittsburgh native. He had grown up on the city's hardscrabble south side, clawed his way through a law degree at Georgetown, and returned home not to cash out at some corporate firm, but to clean up the place that raised him. Despite the tailored suits and his face plastered across election billboards throughout Allegheny County, at his core, Aaron remained the grounded, observant kid from the block. On this particular Tuesday night, he had finally managed to slip his security detail. It was a rare, unauthorized moment of freedom. He wanted to clear his head, but more importantly, he wanted to see his city through the eyes of an ordinary citizen, without the flashing lights of a mayoral motorcade or the sycophantic smiles of precinct captains. He left his city-issued SUV in the underground garage of the city-county building and took his personal vehicle, a faded metallic blue 2012 Ford Taurus with a cracked rear taillight. He swapped his bespoke wool suit for a worn gray university hoodie, dark denim jeans, and a faded baseball cap pulled low over his forehead. Aaron drove east toward Squirrel Hill, one of Pittsburgh's most affluent, predominantly white neighborhoods. A constituent had emailed his office 3 times that week, complaining about a massive, unaddressed sinkhole forming near a public elementary school. Being the hands-on leader he was, Aaron wanted to see the infrastructure failure with his own eyes before grilling the Department of Public Works in the morning. 2 blocks behind him, rolling silently through the misting rain, was Car 44 of the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police. Behind the wheel sat Officer Jake Brennan. Brennan was a 12-year veteran whose personnel file was as thick as a phone book, littered with excessive force complaints, civilian grievances, and insubordination write-ups. He was a relic of a bygone era, an officer who treated his badge not as a shield for the innocent, but as a crown of absolute authority. Beside him in the passenger seat sat Officer Ethan Reed, a 23-year-old rookie fresh out of the academy, still idealistic, but rapidly learning to keep his mouth shut around veteran officers. Brennan was in a foul mood. He had just been passed over for promotion to sergeant for the 3rd time. He blamed the new political correctness in the city, frequently complaining to anyone who would listen that the new administration was making it impossible for real cops to do their jobs. He had no idea what the new mayor actually looked like outside of a stiff campaign poster. To Brennan, politicians were just names on memos. As Car 44 rounded the corner onto Beechwood Boulevard, Brennan narrowed his eyes. Through the sweeping rhythm of his windshield wipers, he spotted the beat-up blue Ford Taurus crawling slowly down the residential street. "Look at this," Brennan muttered, his voice dripping with immediate disdain. He reached out and tapped the dashboard. "What do we have here?" Officer Reed leaned forward, squinting through the rain. "Looks like an older Ford, probably lost." "Lost? In Squirrel Hill?" Brennan scoffed, a dark smirk pulling at the corners of his mouth. "People who drive beat-up junkers like that don't get lost up here. They come up here to shoplift from cars or case houses. Run the plate. Reed typed the license plate into the mobile data terminal. The computer lagged for a second before spitting back the registration. Because Aaron had legally registered the car under a holding trust to maintain some privacy for his family prior to his mayoral run, the terminal simply read AM Holdings, Pittsburgh. Registered to a holding company, Reed reported. Tags are clean, no warrants attached. Brennan scoffed, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the steering wheel. Holding company, probably a drug front. And look who's driving. The glare of the streetlights momentarily illuminated the interior of the Taurus. Brennan saw the silhouette of a black man wearing a hoodie, driving slowly, looking intently at the side of the road. Aaron was actually looking for the reported sinkhole, but to Brennan the narrative was already written in stone. He's casing the neighborhood, Brennan declared, reaching down to the central console. Let's light him up. On what grounds, Jake? Reed asked nervously, glancing at his training officer. He hasn't committed a moving violation. We don't have probable cause. Brennan shot the rookie a look of pure, unadulterated contempt. I have 12 years on the street, kid. I am the probable cause. Watch and learn. Brennan hit the switches. The patrol car's light bar erupted in a blinding strobe of red and blue, painting the wet pavement and the surrounding oak trees in harsh, flashing colors. The siren chirped loudly, a sharp, aggressive wail demanding immediate submission. In the Taurus, Aaron Miles saw the lights reflect in his rearview mirror. He checked his speedometer. He was doing 20 in a 25 zone. He had used his turn signals. He was completely sober. A knot formed in his stomach, not out of fear, but out of a sudden, profound realization. This was it. This was the reality that thousands of his citizens faced every single day. Slowly, deliberately, Aaron pulled the Taurus over to the curb, parking directly beneath a flickering amber streetlight. He turned off the engine, rolled down his window, and placed both of his hands firmly at the 10 and 2 positions on the steering wheel. He took a deep breath, deciding right then and there that he was not Mayor Miles tonight. He was just Aaron. And he was going to see exactly how Officer Jake Brennan treated the citizens of Pittsburgh when nobody was watching. The rain drummed a steady, hollow rhythm against the roof of the Ford Taurus. Aaron watched in the side mirror as the driver's side door of the cruiser swung open. A large, heavily built officer stepped out, immediately unhooking a heavy tactical flashlight from his duty belt. On the passenger side, a younger, thinner officer stepped out, looking hesitant, hanging back near the rear bumper of Aaron's car. Brennan approached the vehicle with a swagger that conveyed total ownership of the street. He didn't walk. He stalked. As he reached the driver's side window, he aimed the blinding beam of his flashlight directly into Aaron's eyes. An intentional and aggressive tactic meant to disorient and intimidate. Aaron squinted, turning his head slightly away from the blinding glare, but he kept his hands visibly locked on the steering wheel. License, registration, and proof of insurance, Brennan barked. There was no greeting, no good evening, no explanation for the stop. Just an order delivered with the crack of a whip. Good evening, officer, Aaron said, his voice calm, steady, and perfectly modulated. Could you tell me why I was pulled over? Brennan lowered the flashlight just an inch, illuminating Aaron's face, though the shadow of the baseball cap still obscured his features. Brennan sneered. I asked the questions, buddy, not you. I said license and registration. Now. I am happy to provide my documents, Aaron replied, maintaining a respectful but firm tone. But as a citizen, I have the right to know the reason for this traffic stop. Was I speeding? Brennan leaned closer to the window, the smell of cheap coffee and spearmint gum wafting into the car. You're driving 5 miles under the limit. You're impeding traffic. You also crossed the yellow line back at the intersection. It was a blatant lie. Aaron had driven flawlessly, and there hadn't been another car on the road to impede. I see, Aaron said softly. He knew challenging the lie right now would only fuel the officer's aggression. My wallet is in my back right pocket. My registration is in the glove compartment. I'm going to reach for them now. Is that all right with you, officer? Aaron paused, waiting for a name. Brennan, the cop snapped. And make it slow. I see any sudden movements, and we're going to have a serious problem. Understood, Officer Brennan, Aaron said. Moving with deliberate, exaggerated slowness, Aaron took his right hand off the wheel. He reached behind him, slipping his fingers into his back pocket to retrieve his leather wallet. As he did, Brennan's hand instinctively dropped to the grip of his service weapon. He unclipped the retention strap with an audible snap. Rookie Officer Reed, standing near the trunk, took a nervous step forward. Jake, he's just getting his wallet. Shut up, Reed. I've got this, Brennan growled without taking his eyes off Aaron. Aaron pulled the wallet out and extracted his driver's license. He handed it through the window. Brennan snatched it out of his hand, bringing it up to the flashlight. He read the name, Aaron Miles. It didn't click. To an arrogant man like Brennan, the mayor was a political entity, a ghost in the city-county building, not a man sitting in a rusty Ford in a hoodie. All right, Aaron, Brennan said, using the mayor's first name in a deliberate show of disrespect. What are you doing in this neighborhood? I'm out for a drive, Aaron answered simply. A drive? Brennan repeated, mocking the phrase. Nobody comes to Squirrel Hill for a drive at 11 o'clock at night in the pouring rain. Where do you live? My address is on the license, officer. Brennan looked at the plastic card again. It listed Aaron's previous address on the south side. He hadn't yet updated it to his new residence since moving closer to the city center for the mayoral term. The south side, Brennan sneered. That's a long way from home, Aaron. You checking out the houses up here? Looking for an open garage door? Aaron's jaw tightened. The blatant racial profiling was no longer a theoretical concept discussed in boardrooms. It was staring him in the face, dripping with malice. I'm looking at the roads, Officer Brennan. There's a sinkhole problem in this district. I wanted to see it for myself. Brennan let out a harsh, barking laugh. A sinkhole problem. Right. You a city engineer now? You got a hard hat in the trunk? I work for the city, yes, Aaron said smoothly. Yeah, I bet you do. Probably sweeping floors at the municipal building, Brennan retorted. He slapped the roof of the Taurus hard with his palm, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the quiet neighborhood. Step out of the vehicle. Aaron didn't move immediately. Officer, I have provided my identification. I have answered your questions. Am I being detained, or am I free to go? The question, a standard legal inquiry, infuriated Brennan. In his mind, citizens didn't have rights. They had whatever permissions he deigned to grant them. The fact that this man in a hoodie was speaking to him with articulate legal precision made Brennan's blood boil. I said step out of the damn car, Brennan shouted, pulling his flashlight back as if preparing to smash the window. You are ordered out of the vehicle under Pennsylvania versus Mims. Now get out before I drag you out through the glass. Aaron knew the case law. He knew the Supreme Court had ruled that officers could order drivers out of their vehicles during a lawful traffic stop, but he also knew the stop itself was unlawful. Still, Aaron was a pragmatist. He had a wife and a 12-year-old daughter. He wasn't going to get himself shot on a dark street over pride. He had all the evidence he needed. I am stepping out, Aaron said. He pulled the door handle and slowly pushed the heavy metal door open. As soon as Aaron's sneakers touched the wet pavement, Brennan was on him. Brennan grabbed Aaron by the shoulder of his hoodie and violently spun him around, slamming him face first against the side of the Taurus. The impact knocked the breath out of Aaron's lungs, his cheek pressing against the cold, wet metal of the car's roof. Spread your legs, Brennan barked, kicking Aaron's right ankle outward so violently that Aaron nearly lost his balance. There is no need for this level of physical force, Officer Brennan, Aaron said, his voice strained but remarkably composed. I am complying with your orders. Shut your mouth, Brennan yelled, pressing his forearm hard into the back of Aaron's neck. He began aggressively patting Aaron down, his hands roughly checking the pockets of the jeans, the waistline, moving with a rough, invasive speed. Officer Reed jogged up to the side of the car, his eyes wide with panic. "Jake, Jesus, he wasn't doing anything, man. You don't need to—" "I told you to shut your mouth, Reed. Go clear the vehicle," Brennan ordered. Reed hesitated, looking at Aaron's calm, stoic face pressed against the glass, and then back at his commanding officer. Reluctantly, the young rookie shined his light into the empty Taurus, finding nothing but some old coffee cups and a stack of city planning documents on the passenger seat. "He's clean, Jake. There's nothing in the car," Reed pleaded. "Let's just run his license and cut him loose. This is a bad stop." "I decide what a bad stop is," Brennan spat. He leaned in close to Aaron's ear. "You think you're smart, huh? Talking back to me, asking if you're detained. You people come up to this side of town and think you can do whatever you want. Not on my watch." Aaron turned his head slightly, locking eyes with Brennan. The anger in the mayor's chest was a roaring fire, but his mind was an ocean of ice. He was taking a mental photograph of every word, every movement, every violation of department policy. "You people?" Aaron repeated softly. "Care to elaborate on what you mean by that, officer?" Brennan's face flushed with rage. "That's it. Put your hands behind your back. You're going in." "On what charge?" Aaron asked, not resisting as Brennan yanked his left arm behind his back. "Failure to comply, resisting arrest, suspicion of prowling. Take your pick, buddy. We'll figure it out when we get to the precinct." The cold steel of the handcuffs clicked shut, biting mercilessly into the wrists of Aaron Miles. Brennan tightened them an extra notch, ensuring the metal dug painfully into Aaron's skin. It was a petty, vindictive tactic, meant to cause physical pain without leaving major bruising. "You are making a profound mistake, Officer Brennan," Aaron said quietly. "One that you will not be able to undo." Brennan laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Save it for the public defender, pal." Brennan grabbed Aaron by the collar of his hoodie and shoved him toward the rear of the patrol cruiser. Aaron stumbled but caught his balance, refusing to let the officer see him fall. He ducked his head and slid into the cramped, hard plastic back seat of the police car. The air inside smelled of stale sweat, cheap institutional cleaner, and the lingering despair of 1,000 prior arrests. The heavy door slammed shut, sealing Aaron inside the cage. Brennan climbed into the driver's seat, panting slightly from the adrenaline of the exertion. He looked at Aaron through the thick plexiglass partition in the rearview mirror. "Comfortable back there, Aaron?" Brennan mocked. Reed slid into the passenger seat, his face pale. He looked sick to his stomach. He didn't look back at Aaron. Instead, he stared straight ahead at the rain pounding against the windshield. "You didn't read me my Miranda rights," Aaron stated from the darkness of the back seat. "I don't have to unless I'm interrogating you," Brennan fired back, putting the cruiser into drive. "Looks like you've been through the system before, knowing all the buzzwords. Don't worry, we'll give you plenty of time to talk at the station." Aaron leaned back against the hard plastic, the cuffs digging painfully into his spine. "I would like to make a phone call." "You get a phone call when you're booked into the system. Sit back and enjoy the ride." Brennan keyed his radio. "Dispatch, car 44. Show me en route to the 4th precinct with one adult male in custody." "Copy, 44. Dispatcher Brenda's tired voice crackled over the radio. "Need a tow for the vehicle?" Brennan glanced in his rearview mirror at the Taurus. "Negative, dispatch. Leave it on the curb. City impound can grab it tomorrow." The cruiser accelerated away from Squirrel Hill, the flashing lights casting eerie shadows across the wet trees. Aaron Miles sat in the dark, feeling the vibrations of the road beneath him. He wasn't thinking about the pain in his wrists or the humiliation of being pressed against the hood of a car. He was thinking about the 4th precinct. He knew the commander of the 4th precinct well. Captain Daniel Foster was an old-school cop, but he was a fair man. Aaron had met with Foster extensively during the transition period. Aaron also knew the city's police chief, Robert Hayes, was currently asleep in his bed across town. Aaron made a promise to himself in the back of that cruiser. He was going to let Brennan carry this charade all the way to the end. He was going to let Brennan walk him into the bullpen, parade him past the desk sergeant, and put him in a holding cell. He was going to let the officer dig his own grave so deep that no union lawyer, no fraternal order, and no corrupt arbitration board could ever pull him out. The cruiser turned off the highway and pulled into the gritty industrial zone of the East End. Up ahead, the glowing blue lights of the 4th Precinct station house cut through the fog. The building was a brutalist concrete structure, intimidating and uninviting. Brennan steered the cruiser down the ramp and into the secure underground sally port. The heavy steel garage doors rolled down behind them with a loud final crash, locking them in. Brennan threw the car in park and turned off the engine. He unbuckled his seatbelt and turned to look through the plexiglass at Aaron. "End of the line, Aaron," Brennan sneered, grabbing his clipboard. "Welcome to my house." Aaron looked back at him, his eyes calm, dark, and utterly unbothered. "Lead the way, officer," Aaron replied. Brennan opened the rear door, grabbed Aaron by the arm, and yanked him out into the harsh fluorescent light of the garage. Reed followed silently behind them, his head down. As they walked toward the heavy steel doors leading to the booking area, Aaron prepared himself for the performance of a lifetime. The stage was set, and the curtain was about to rise on Officer Jake Brennan's final act as a police officer. The heavy steel doors of the 4th Precinct swung open, and the overwhelming scent of industrial bleach, stale coffee, and unwashed bodies hit Aaron Miles like a physical wall. The bullpen was a chaotic theater of municipal despair. Telephones rang incessantly, their shrill tones cutting through the cacophony of shouting suspects, clicking keyboards, and the static hiss of police radios. Under the harsh, flickering fluorescent lights, the peeling seafoam green paint of the walls looked sickly, reflecting decades of wear and tear. Officer Jake Brennan gripped Aaron's bicep tightly, marching him past a line of battered metal desks where exhausted detectives typed up reports with 2 fingers. Aaron's hands were still locked tightly behind his back, the metal cuffs digging a red, raw ring into his skin, but his posture remained perfectly straight. He walked with a quiet, deliberate dignity that seemed entirely out of place in the grim surroundings. Officer Ethan Reed trailed a few paces behind, his eyes darting around the room. The young rookie felt a knot tightening in his stomach that he couldn't quite explain. Most suspects brought in on resisting arrest or prowling charges were belligerent, loud, or visibly terrified. The man in the gray hoodie was none of those things. He was observing the room with the analytical eye of a building inspector, taking in the locations of the security cameras, the layout of the desks, and the faces of the personnel. Brennan shoved Aaron toward the high, elevated counter of the booking desk. Sitting behind the reinforced glass was Desk Sergeant Bill Gable, a 30-year veteran with a graying mustache, heavy bags under his eyes, and the exhausted demeanor of a man who had seen every flavor of human stupidity. "Got a live one for you, Bill," Brennan announced loudly, slapping his clipboard down on the counter. He wanted the rest of the room to hear him. It was a performance. Sergeant Gable didn't look up from his computer monitor right away. He finished typing a sentence, hit enter with a heavy sigh, and finally peered down through the scratched plexiglass at Aaron. "What's the charge, Brennan?" Gable asked, his voice a gravelly monotone. "Take your pick," Brennan smirked, leaning against the counter. "Failure to comply with a lawful order, resisting arrest, suspicion of prowling in Squirrel Hill." Guy was creeping around Beechwood Boulevard in a beat-up Ford looking at houses. Refused to step out of his vehicle when ordered. Gable reached out a thick, calloused hand. "ID." Brennan fished Aaron's driver's license out of his uniform pocket and tossed it into the metal tray beneath the glass. Gable picked it up, adjusting his reading glasses. Aaron Miles, Gable read aloud. The name barely registered in his fatigued brain. To a desk sergeant working the graveyard shift, names were just data points to be fed into the machine. Address on the south side. You're a long way from home, Mr. Miles. I was driving on public roads, Sergeant, Aaron replied, his voice calm and carrying a natural, unforced authority. I complied with every command given to me. I provided my identification. I was physically assaulted, pulled from my vehicle, and arrested without being read my rights or told what crime I was suspected of committing. Gable paused. He looked closely at Aaron for the first time. Suspects usually cursed, cried, or slurred their words. They didn't use perfect syntax and articulate civil rights violations with the clinical precision of a prosecuting attorney. Brennan let out a loud, mocking laugh. Listen to this guy, Bill. Thinks he's a constitutional scholar because he watched an episode of Law and Order. He was combative. Reed was there. Tell him, kid. Reed stepped up to the desk, swallowing hard. Gable shifted his gaze to the rookie. That right, Reed? He fought you? Reed looked at Aaron's calm, dark eyes, and then at Brennan's glaring, expectant face. He didn't get physical, Sergeant, Reed stammered, trying to walk a tightrope between truth and loyalty. He just asked a lot of questions, kept asking if he was being detained. Brennan shot Reed a look of pure venom. He refused a direct order to exit the vehicle under MIMS. That's resisting. Book him, Bill. Gable sighed, rubbing his temples. He didn't have the energy for a pissing contest between a hot-headed patrolman and an articulate suspect. Empty your pockets, Miles. Take off the hoodie, the shoelaces, and the belt. Brennan unlocked the handcuffs, roughly yanking Aaron's arms forward. Aaron didn't rub his chafed wrists. He silently removed his faded baseball cap, placing it in the plastic property bin on the counter. He unzipped the worn university hoodie, revealing a plain, neatly ironed white t-shirt underneath. He removed his belt and his shoelaces, his movements precise and unhurried. Every second, Aaron was calculating. He looked up at the black dome of the security camera mounted directly above the booking desk. Good, he thought. Audio and video. Perfect. Put him in cell 3, Gable ordered, sliding the property bin behind the desk. We'll get him fingerprinted when the backlog clears. Brennan grabbed Aaron by the shoulder again, steering him away from the desk and toward the holding cells lining the back wall of the precinct. Cell 3 was a 10-by-10 cage of thick steel bars and reinforced concrete. Inside, a man in a torn jacket was sleeping on the floor, snoring loudly, while another man paced frantically, muttering to himself. The smell of urine and vomit was sharp enough to make the eyes water. Brennan slid the heavy barred door open with a loud metallic clatter. In you go, Your Honor, Brennan mocked, using the title sarcastically, entirely unaware of the cosmic irony of his words. He shoved Aaron into the cell. Get comfortable. You're going to be here a while. Aaron turned around as the heavy door slammed shut, the deadbolt engaging with a heavy thud. He walked over to the cold steel bench bolted to the cinder block wall and sat down. He didn't look at the other inmates. He just looked through the bars, straight at Jake Brennan. I am legally entitled to a phone call, officer, Aaron said, his voice easily carrying through the bars. Yeah. When I get around to it, Brennan sneered, turning his back and walking away to a nearby desk to start his paperwork. Aaron sat in the cage for 20 agonizing minutes. He used the time to mentally draft the executive orders he was going to sign the following morning. He was going to overhaul the entire patrol division. He was going to mandate body cameras for every single officer, funding it by gutting the department's militarized vehicle budget. Brennan had just given the mayor the exact ammunition he needed to force the police union into submission. Finally, Sergeant Gable called out from the desk. Brennan, let Miles make his call. State law. I don't want the ACLU breathing down my neck because you're dragging your feet. Brennan rolled his eyes, dropping his pen. He walked over to cell 3, unlocked it, and gestured toward a battered metal-cased telephone bolted to the wall at the end of the hallway. 3 minutes, Miles, Brennan warned. And don't bother calling a lawyer. No one's coming out in this rain for a prowler. Aaron stepped out of the cell and walked to the phone. He didn't need to look up a number. He had this specific number memorized. It was a direct encrypted cell phone line meant only for extreme municipal emergencies. He picked up the heavy receiver, waited for the dial tone, and punched in the 10 digits. Across town, in a sprawling gated property overlooking the Allegheny River, the shrill ring of a cell phone shattered the silence of a dark master bedroom. Chief of Police Robert Hayes groaned, rolling over in his king-sized bed. He was a heavily built man in his late 50s, his hair silver, his face lined from 30 years of city politics and police work. He reached blindly for the nightstand, his fingers finding the vibrating device. He squinted at the screen. The caller ID didn't show a name, just a secure municipal code. Hayes sat bolt upright. Only 3 people in the city had that number, and a call at this hour meant a catastrophe, a terror threat, a mass casualty event, or a riot. He swiped the screen and brought the phone to his ear. Hayes, Bob, it's Aaron, the voice on the other end said calmly. Hayes blinked, trying to clear the sleep from his brain. Mr. Mayor, sir, is everything all right? Where are your security detail? In the grimy hallway of the 4th precinct, Aaron kept his voice low, his tone conversational, but laced with an icy edge that sent a shiver down the chief's spine. My detail is at my residence. I am currently standing at a wall phone in the booking area of the 4th precinct, Bob. I am wearing socks without shoes, and my wrists are bleeding from being improperly handcuffed. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the phone line. In his bedroom, Chief Hayes swung his legs out of bed, his bare feet hitting the hardwood floor. All the blood instantly drained from his face. Sir, what? Hayes breathed, praying he had misheard. You're at the 4th? Visiting? No, Bob. I am in custody, Aaron said clearly. I took my personal vehicle out for a drive to inspect a reported infrastructure failure in Squirrel Hill. I was pulled over by car 44. The officer's name is Brennan. He pulled me over without probable cause, ordered me out of the car, physically slammed me against the roof of my vehicle, handcuffed me, and arrested me on fabricated charges of resisting arrest and suspicion of prowling. Hayes felt the room spin. The mayor, a newly elected, wildly popular, reform-minded black mayor who had just won an election on a platform of police accountability, had been violently arrested on a bogus profile stop by one of his own patrolmen. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a career-ending, city-burning, national news-making catastrophe. Sir, Mr. Mayor, I have no words, Hayes stammered, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He was already walking toward his closet, pulling a uniform shirt off a hanger. Are you injured? Did he strike you? No strikes, just unnecessary roughness and an illegal detainment, Aaron replied, his eyes tracking Brennan, who was sitting at a desk 50 feet away, laughing with another officer and pointing at Aaron. I want you to listen to me very carefully, Bob. Yes, sir, anything. Do not call the desk. Do not alert the officers on the floor. I want this to play out naturally until you arrive. You are going to come down here personally, and you are going to bring Captain Foster with you. I'm on my way, Mr. Mayor. 15 minutes. I am so profoundly sorry. Save the apologies for tomorrow, Bob. Just get here. Aaron hung up the phone. The loud clack of the plastic receiver hitting the metal cradle echoed in the hallway. Time's up, Aaron, Brennan shouted from his desk. Did you wake up, Mommy? Aaron turned around. He looked at Brennan, a slow, dark smile creeping onto his face. It wasn't a smile of humor. It was the smile of a predator watching a trap spring shut. No, Officer Brennan, Aaron said softly as he walked back toward his holding cell. I woke up Daddy. Brennan frowned, unsettled for a fraction of a second by the sheer confidence radiating from the man in the dirty socks, but his ego quickly suppressed the feeling. He shoved Aaron back into cell 3 and locked the door. Meanwhile, 3 miles away, Chief Hayes was flying down the wet, empty streets of Pittsburgh in his unmarked black SUV, the red and blue grille lights flashing silently. His phone was pressed to his ear, ringing the private line of Captain Daniel Foster, the commanding officer of the 4th Precinct. Foster, a strict, no-nonsense commander, was actually asleep in his private office on the 2nd floor of the precinct. He often pulled double shifts, sleeping on a leather couch in his office. The phone vibrated violently against the glass coffee table, waking Foster. He rubbed his eyes and answered. "Foster." "Daniel, it's Hayes." The chief's voice barked through the speaker, sounding breathless and panicked. "Are you at the house?" "Yeah, Chief. I'm upstairs in my office." "What's going on? You sound out of breath." "Daniel, listen to me very carefully. Get off that couch. Get your uniform on and get down to the bullpen immediately." "What's happened?" Foster asked, suddenly alert, standing up and reaching for his duty belt. "One of your patrolmen, Brennan, car 44. He just brought in a suspect from Squirrel Hill." "Brennan?" Foster groaned. He hated Brennan. The man was a walking liability. "What did he do this time? Shoot somebody's dog?" "Worse, Daniel." "Oh God, it's so much worse," Hayes said, his voice actually trembling. "Go down to the desk. Look at the booking log. Do not make a scene. Just secure the prisoner and wait for me. I am pulling into your garage in 3 minutes." The line went dead. Foster stared at his phone for a second. He had known Robert Hayes for 20 years. He had never, ever heard the man sound terrified. Foster threw on his uniform jacket, didn't bother with a tie, and practically sprinted out of his office. He took the metal stairs down to the main floor 2 at a time, his heavy boots echoing loudly in the stairwell. He burst through the security doors and into the bullpen. The room went instantly quiet. Desk Sergeant Gable sat up perfectly straight. Detectives stopped typing. Brennan, who was still casually filling out his arrest report, dropped his pen and stood up at attention. The captain never came down to the bullpen at 1 in the morning unless someone was dead. Foster ignored all of them. He walked directly to the elevated booking desk. He was a large man, broad-shouldered, with a stern, heavily lined face that commanded instant respect. "Gable," Foster snapped, pointing a thick finger at the desk sergeant. "Give me the booking log, right now." Gable, looking confused and slightly alarmed, quickly hit print on his computer. He slid the warm piece of paper through the slot in the glass. Foster snatched it. His eyes scanned the most recent entry. Arresting Officer Jake Brennan, badge 8842. Suspect name, Miles Aaron. Charges, failure to comply, resisting, suspicion of prowling. Foster stopped breathing. The letters on the page seemed to blur and rearrange themselves. Miles. Aaron. He looked up slowly. His eyes locked onto Officer Jake Brennan, who was standing a few feet away, looking slightly nervous but largely unconcerned. "Brennan," Foster whispered. The sound was so quiet, so filled with absolute, unadulterated horror, that it made the hair on the back of Rookie Reed's neck stand up. "Yes, Captain," Brennan answered, trying to sound confident. "Where is he?" Foster asked, his voice shaking. "Where is the man you just brought in?" "Cell 3, Captain," Brennan said, pointing toward the back wall. "Guy was prowling and—" "Shut your mouth," Foster hissed, cutting him off with a ferocity that made several officers physically step back. "Do not say another word, or so help me God I will put you through that wall." Foster didn't wait for a response. He turned and practically ran down the short hallway toward the holding cells. As he approached cell 3, he looked through the thick steel bars. Sitting on the cold concrete bench, wearing a cheap white t-shirt and gray sweatpants, shoeless with red raw marks on his wrists, was the mayor of Pittsburgh, Aaron Miles looked up at the pale, horrified face of the precinct captain. "Good evening, Daniel," the mayor said quietly. "You run a very interesting precinct." Captain Daniel Foster's hands, normally steady enough to qualify as a precinct sharpshooter, were shaking so violently that the massive brass keyring clipped to his belt chimed like church bells in the dead silent hallway. He stared through the thick steel bars of Cell 3, his mind struggling to reconcile the reality in front of him. Aaron Miles, the newly elected mayor of Pittsburgh, the man who held the purse strings to the entire police department pension fund, was sitting on a urine-stained concrete bench in wet socks. "Mr. Mayor," Foster choked out, his voice a gravelly whisper, stripped of all its usual booming authority. "Sir, Jesus Christ, I don't—" Foster fumbled frantically with the keys, finally shoving the heavy iron key into the cell's deadbolt. He twisted it, and the mechanism clanked loudly. He grabbed the bars and slid the heavy door open, stepping aside as if making way for royalty. "Please, sir, come out. I am so profoundly sorry. I had no idea. We are getting this sorted immediately." Aaron did not stand up. He remained seated on the cold bench, his dark eyes fixed entirely on the captain. He didn't blink. He didn't move. "Leave the door open, Daniel," Aaron said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "But I am not stepping out of this cell until Chief Hayes arrives. I want the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in this city to see exactly how his department treats the citizens of Pittsburgh." Foster looked like he was going to be physically sick. The color had completely drained from his weathered face. "Sir, please, you don't need to sit in there. Come to my office. Let me get you a coffee. Let me get you your belongings." "I said I am staying right here, Captain," Aaron interrupted. The absolute authority in his tone sliced through the stale air like a razor. Foster swallowed hard, nodding rapidly. "Yes, sir. Understood, sir." He took a step back, standing at rigid attention outside the open cell door, acting as a personal guard to a man who was technically his prisoner. Back in the bullpen, 30 yards away, the bizarre scene had not gone unnoticed. The ambient noise of the precinct had slowly died down to a strained, confused murmur. Detectives had stopped typing. Desk Sergeant Gable was craning his neck over the elevated counter. Officer Jake Brennan stood up from his desk, a frown creasing his forehead. He nudged rookie officer Ethan Reed, who was sitting at the adjacent terminal. "Hey," Brennan muttered, pointing down the hall. "What the hell is the captain doing? He's standing at attention outside Cell 3. Did that prowler know him or something?" Reed squinted, the knot in his stomach tightening into a painful twist of pure dread. "I don't know, Jake, but Foster looks like he just saw a ghost. Maybe we should have just run his name through the master database before we locked him up." "Relax, kid," Brennan scoffed, though a tiny, unfamiliar seed of doubt began to take root in his chest. "He's a nobody, probably a snitch Foster uses. He's just doing damage control." Before Brennan could rationalize it any further, the heavy steel security doors leading from the underground garage burst open with the force of an explosion. Chief of Police Robert Hayes stormed into the bullpen. The entire room froze. For the Chief of Police to appear in a precinct bullpen at 1:15 a.m., fully in uniform with 4 gold stars gleaming on his collar, was an event equivalent to a comet striking the building. "Attention on deck!" Sergeant Gable bellowed, instinctively leaping to his feet. Every officer in the room stood up, squaring their shoulders. Hayes didn't look at any of them. His face was a mask of unadulterated fury and sheer panic. He marched across the linoleum floor, his heavy boots pounding a terrifying rhythm, heading straight for the holding cells. Brennan watched the chief walk past him. The seed of doubt in his chest suddenly bloomed into a suffocating, icy vine of terror. His breath caught in his throat. He looked at the holding cell. He looked at the chief. He looked at the name on his arrest report. Miles. Aaron. No, Brennan thought. the blood rushing in his ears. No, no, no. It's a coincidence. It's a common name. It's a guy in a hoodie. It's a nobody. Hayes reached cell 3. He saw Captain Foster standing at attention. He looked inside and saw Aaron sitting on the bench. The chief of police, a man who commanded 3,000 armed officers, took off his uniform cap and lowered his head. "Mr. Mayor," Chief Hayes said, his voice carrying clearly down the hallway and directly into the dead silent bullpen. "I have no words to excuse this. I am entirely at your disposal, sir." In the bullpen, the words hit like a physical shockwave. "Mr. Mayor." Desk Sergeant Gable slowly lowered himself back into his chair. His eyes worked, staring at the property bin containing the faded baseball cap and the hoodie. Ethan Reed felt his knees actually buckle. He grabbed the edge of the desk to keep from collapsing, his mind flashing back to the moment Brennan slammed the man against the roof of the Taurus. He had stood there. He had watched it happen. He was an accessory to the false arrest of the mayor and Jake Brennan. Brennan stopped breathing. The pen he was holding slipped from his fingers, clattering loudly against the linoleum floor. His heart began to hammer against his ribs like a trapped animal. The arrogant sneer melted off his face, replaced by a pale, slack-jawed expression of absolute ruinous horror. The realization crashed down on him with the weight of a falling building. The man he had racially profiled, the man he had mocked, the man he had illegally detained, physically assaulted, and shoved into a cage. It was Aaron Miles, the mayor of Pittsburgh. Slowly, deliberately, Aaron stood up from the concrete bench. He walked out of the cell, his socked feet padding softly against the floor. He ignored Foster. He ignored Hayes. He walked straight down the hallway, entering the bullpen. The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. 30 police officers stood frozen in place, their eyes locked on the man in the white t-shirt and gray sweatpants. Aaron stopped in the center of the room. He looked directly at Jake Brennan. Brennan was visibly trembling. The imposing, aggressive predator who had stalked the streets of Squirrel Hill was gone. In his place stood a broken, terrified bully facing a firing squad. "Officer Brennan," Aaron said, his voice echoing off the peeling green walls. It wasn't a shout. It was a measured, surgical strike. "You asked me what I do for the city. I believe you suggested I sweep the floors at the municipal building." Brennan opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His vocal cords were paralyzed by fear. Aaron took a step closer. "I told you that you were making a profound mistake. But what you don't know, officer, is that our meeting tonight was not entirely a coincidence." A murmur rippled through the bullpen. Chief Hayes and Captain Foster stepped up behind the mayor, flanking him like Secret Service agents. "For the past 3 weeks," Aaron continued, his eyes piercing through Brennan, "I have been privately auditing the internal affairs files of the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police. I was looking for the liabilities, the bad apples that your union fights so desperately to protect. Your name, Officer Brennan, was at the very top of my list. 12 excessive force complaints. 3 civil rights lawsuits settled out of court with taxpayer money. Countless instances of insubordination." Brennan swallowed, a bead of sweat tracing down his temple. "Sir, Mr. Mayor, I didn't know—" "Of course you didn't know who I was." Aaron's voice cracked like a whip. The sudden rise in volume made Brennan flinch. "That is the entire point. You didn't know I was the mayor. You just saw a black man in a hoodie driving through a wealthy neighborhood, and you assumed you were untouchable. You assumed I was nobody, and therefore I had no rights. I went to Squirrel Hill tonight because I knew Car 44 was assigned to that sector. I wanted to see if the monster in the files was real." Aaron pointed a finger directly at Brennan's chest. "You exceeded my worst expectations. You lied about my driving. You escalated the situation without cause. You physically assaulted a compliant citizen. You violated my Fourth Amendment rights, and you did it with a smile on your face. Aaron turned his head slightly to look at the chief of police. Chief Hayes, Captain Foster. Yes, Mr. Mayor, they answered simultaneously. This man, Aaron said, refusing to take his eyes off Brennan, is a disgrace to the badge he wears. He is a danger to the public, and he is the exact reason why the citizens of this city do not trust the police. I want him stripped of his police powers immediately. I want his badge, his weapon, and his resignation on my desk by sunrise. If I do not have it, Chief, I will fire you. I will fire the captain, and I will dismantle this precinct brick by brick. Hayes didn't hesitate for a fraction of a second. Captain Foster, relieve Officer Brennan of his duty belt and his badge. Now. Foster stepped forward, his face a mask of pure righteous anger. He had always hated Brennan, but the Union had always protected him. Not tonight. Tonight, the Union couldn't save him. Hands away from your waist, Brennan, Foster ordered sharply. Trembling, completely humiliated in front of his entire shift, Brennan slowly unclipped his radio. He handed it to the captain. Then he unbuckled his heavy leather duty belt, the holster containing his service weapon heavy in his hands. He handed it over. Finally, with shaking fingers, he unpinned the silver shield from his chest. In less than a minute, Jake Brennan went from the apex predator of the streets to an unemployed, disgraced civilian facing federal civil rights charges. Aaron watched the badge drop into the captain's hand. He felt no joy, only a grim satisfaction that one piece of the rot had been excised. Then Aaron turned his gaze to the young rookie, Ethan Reed. Reed stiffened, his eyes wide with fear, waiting for the axe to fall on his own neck. Officer Reed, Aaron said quietly. Yes, Mr. Mayor. You knew the stop was bad. You knew there was no probable cause. You told him to let me go. Reed nodded slowly, surprised that the mayor had remembered his weak attempts at intervention. But you stood by, Aaron said, his tone softening into a harsh, undeniable lesson. When he threw me against the car, you stood by. When he locked me in the cruiser, you stood by. Silence in the face of corruption is complicity, son. You let an older officer bully you into violating your oath. I am not taking your badge tonight. But I want you to remember this feeling. I want you to remember the shame you feel right now for the rest of your career. Because if you ever stand by and watch another citizen be abused, I will end your career just as quickly as I ended his. Do we understand each other? Yes, sir, Reed whispered, a tear of sheer relief and profound guilt slipping down his cheek. I understand. I swear to you, sir. Aaron nodded. He turned back to the desk sergeant. Sergeant Gable, my property, please. Gable practically tripped over himself, grabbing the plastic bin, sliding it over the counter. Aaron calmly put his belt back on, laced up his shoes, and slipped the hoodie back over his head. Mr. Mayor, my car is outside, Chief Hayes said softly. Please, allow me to drive you home. No, Bob, Aaron replied, picking up his baseball cap. I'll be calling my wife to come get me, but you and I are going to have a very long meeting at the city-county building tomorrow at 8 a.m. Bring the department budget. We're buying body cameras for every officer in this city, and we're paying for it out of the patrol division's overtime fund. Aaron Miles put his faded baseball cap back on his head, pulling it low. He walked out of the 4th Precinct bullpen, leaving behind a shattered, disgraced cop, a terrified department, and a city that was about to wake up to a revolution. The predator had caught his prey, only to realize he had swallowed a grenade, and Aaron Miles had just pulled the pin. What a satisfying dose of instant karma. Mayor Aaron Miles proved that true leadership isn't just about passing laws. It's about walking in the shoes of the people you serve and facing the broken systems head on. Officer Brennan thought he was untouchable, but his arrogance ended up costing him everything in the span of a single hour.